Now, let's style our anchor elements. We don't have to be overly specific with this selector because there are only one set of anchor elements inside of our nav element. So we'll scroll down here and we'll say nav A, and we'll set the font weight to 800, and we'll set the padding to 15 pixels and 10 pixels. Remember, the font weight property can be set to either normal or bold, but it can also be set to a specific number. When we included our fonts from Google previously, this was one of the font weights that we picked out, and I think this is an appropriate place to use it. Next, we've added some padding on all sides of our links. This will make the click targets on them easier to hit with a mouse or a touchscreen device. So if we switch back and refresh, you can see that our links are now much bolder and they have more space around them. And when I hover over, you can see that a lot of the space around the text is now also clickable, which makes it just a little bit easier to hit these tap targets when you're on a mobile device or click on them if you're on a desktop like I am. Before we wrap this section up, there's one more loose end that we should tie up. Down in our footer, you'll notice that our social media icons are pretty large. We want them to be smaller and less prominent. These icons are about twice the size that they need to be. That's because we want these images to look sharp on high-resolution displays that have double pixel density. By creating the images at twice the size and then resizing them downward using CSS, the pixels will still be there for high-res displays. These types of high-res displays aren't everywhere yet, but they're starting to become more common in mobile devices as well as desktop devices. In order to do this, we actually need to switch back to our HTML so that we can properly select each one of these. On our first link, just after the alt attribute, I'm going to add a class attribute called social icon. Then I'm going to copy that class attribute and paste it on our second link as well. Now, we could have selected these in a slightly different way. For example, we could say footer and then anchor, but I wanted to show you how classes can be used multiple times on a page. So in this case, we're going to create a CSS class and it will be applied to both items. So let's save our HTML and go back to our CSS. And in our footer here, let's skip down and make some room to work. And I'm going to select our social icons. And I'm going to give them an explicit width of 20 pixels, an explicit height of 20 pixels, and a margin of 0 and 5 pixels. So that's 0 on the top and bottom, and 5 on the left and right, which will give some separation between the two icons. The width and height is half the size of the icons. They're about 40 pixels each, so resizing them downward will add more detail into a denser area. Let's go back, refresh the page, and as you can see, our icons are now much smaller and at a more reasonable size. Great work! We've made a lot of progress on our site. At this point, you've learned most of the skills you need to build almost any type of simple web page. Learning HTML and CSS can be very challenging at first, but with continued practice, you'll find that the elements and properties become second nature to you. We still need to create the other pages, but that will be much easier now that we have most of the styling done for common elements, like the header and footer. Before we continue, let's review what we've learned.